What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Gyms with Josh, EP5. We're already at EP5. Blessed to be here. Blessed to talk some ball with y'all. Let's talk about week 1 of the NFL season in terms of fantasy football as well as terms of betting. All right. One thing we noticed week 1 was a lot of inconsistency, right? A lot of guys are not playing football in the preseason anymore. So we had a lot of guys who looked not as good as we thought they would, but then we had some surprise gems that definitely dropped out there for us. All right. So speaking of those guys, right, we want to go with the waiver wire. One guy that definitely came back from a blast from the past was Keenan Allen. He looked amazing against the Chiefs Friday night. He looked like wide receiver 2 for the Chargers. A lot of targets, even scored a touchdown. I think Keenan Allen is definitely one of those guys we want to pick up ASAP off of that waiver wire and add him to your team. He's going to be wide receiver 2 for the Chargers this year. Another guy I liked last week, Dylan Sampson with the Cleveland Browns, right? Looked like Mr. Ford was going to be the starting running back, but Dylan Sampson got most of the action for the Browns this week. Mr. Judkins is still on suspension. I think Dylan Sampson might end up being RB1 for the Browns. Looked really good catching the ball out of the backfield. So if you have a chance in that waiver wire to pick him up, definitely want to add him. Another guy I was surprised with last week, and I was surprised how well he played, but also how athletic he looked out there. Didn't know the guy could run the ball a little bit like this. Michael Penix from the Atlanta Falcons looked really, really good against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Had a few drops, a few things that I thought people should have caught for him as well. Stats could have looked even better. I think Michael Penix is definitely one of those guys you want to add. And here's a sneaky guy. Didn't even play last week that I think you should definitely add through the waiver wire. Isaiah Likely. I watched the Buffalo versus Baltimore game, and it looks like Mark Andrews is definitely on his last legs out there. I think the Baltimore offense is still going to be very explosive, and I think it'd be even better when Isaiah Likely comes back. He's going to end up being tight end 1. If you're having issues with tight ends on your team, definitely add him, stash him. He's one of those guys that I think you can work with this year. Going into week 2, let's talk about some matchups that I like seeing this week. One guy I just talked about on the waiver wire, man. Keenan Allen against the Las Vegas Raiders. He's going to be my gym this week. I love what I seen from Keenan last week. Always been an amazing route runner. But the fact that Justin Herbert looked as good as he did and the Chargers offense looked pretty good against a really tough Chiefs defense, I think Keenan Allen is going to be one of those guys who's going to rock out this week as well against the Raiders. I thought that the receivers for the Patriots did very well against the Raiders last week. So I think Keenan Allen is going to have a good game out of the slot. Might even get some targets in that red zone again. Lock him into your flex this week. Another guy I like in that game who looked really, really good week 1. We talked about him on previous EPs. Jacoby Myers for the Raiders. I thought Geno Smith looked at him as his number 1 receiver. He, shared the ball to him and Brock Bowers pretty much evenly. I think Jacoby Myers going forward is the wide receiver 1 clear for the Raiders, and I think he's going to have a good game this week as well against the Chargers. Going to be one of those games I think the Raiders are going to have to throw a lot to stay in the game. Jacoby Myers this week, lock him in. Another guy I love this week, Jerry Jeudy against the Baltimore Ravens. I love Jerry Jeudy this week simply because Flacco threw the ball pretty well last week, and Jerry Jeudy is clearly their number 1. But I like this matchup a lot simply because the Ravens defense is pretty ass. Not going to lie. Didn't look very good last week. Growing up, the Ravens were really, a defensive team when I was growing up, but now they've really become more of an offensive team, and their defense is just getting a lot of points put on them during the seasons that I've seen the last few years. And I think Jerry Jeudy is just going to have a good game against them. I think the Browns are going to have to play catch up behind the Ravens offense. I think Jerry Jeudy is going to have a big game this week. And my last 2 guys I have for receivers, a little bit of surprise this week, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, right? I know the Dolphins looked awful last week, but guess what? They're going home. Everybody knows the Dolphins play better in Miami, and they're going against the Patriots. Patriots looked really bad in the secondary last week. Some of that could be because Gonzalez was out, but Geno Smith threw for close to 350 yards last week. I think Tua and the Dolphins offense will look a lot better at home this week in that heat in Miami, and I think Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle will both have very solid games this week. So for wide receivers, those are some guys I think you should lock in on this week. Running backs this week. 2 guys that I love, man, James Conner and Trey Benson from the Cardinals. They're going against the Carolina Panthers. All right, Trevor Etienne from the Jacksonville Jaguars shredded them last week. And to be honest, James Conner and Trey Benson both looked really good last week against the Saints. Been telling you guys for a while, Trey Benson is going to keep sneaking in there to possibly be that RB1 by the end of the season. Fast guy, good out of the backfield catching the ball, but also James Conner still the bell cow, right? Getting a lot of carries in that red zone, like the both of them against Carolina this week. Chase Brown against the Jaguars, another guy like this week. Chase Brown pretty much got majority of the share in the Bengals backfield last week. And Chuba Hubbard had a really good game against the Jags last week. They just got behind. They couldn't keep running the ball. I think Chase Brown's going to have a big week this week. And my last running back I like this week. Didn't get as much share count as he probably should have last week, but still looked good in his role. Trey Henderson against the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins will be scoring a lot this week. I think Trey Henderson will be in a lot, catching the ball out of the backfield. I think he's going to have a big game this week, and maybe that breakout game to finally put him as an RB1 in that Patriots offense. A couple quarterbacks I like this week. Justin Herbert against the Raiders. All right, I thought Drake May didn't play bad against the Raiders at all last week. Justin Herbert, though, looked amazing against the Chiefs last week. I think he's going to do the same thing this week against the Raiders. Division game. I think Justin Herbert is a lock this week. If you don't have him on your team, go get him off of that waiver wire. If he's on your team, lock him into QB1 this week. Another guy I like this week, Trevor Lawrence. Didn't look that great against Carolina last week, but, they had rain delay, weather delay. So, that kind of throws off the timing of the game. But I think, the Jags are going to really have to play catch up with the Bengals offense this week. So I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be out there throwing the ball a good bit. Sneaky bet to sneak him in your lineup this week, and I think he's going to play very, very well. And last but not least, man, Geno Smith. Again, I think the Chargers are going to play really good this week. They're going to put some points on the board. I think Geno's going to have to be out there slinging that ball around. Looked pretty good in week 1. Didn't have as many touchdowns as I'd like to see, but had tons of yardage. I think Geno Smith this week against the Chargers is a good pick. All right, and let's finish up with our tight ends this week, guys. Juwan Johnson from the New Orleans Saints. All right. Look amazing last week. Spencer Rattler is a young quarterback. He's going to, really rely on his tight end. He's going to drop the ball off a lot. I think Juwan Johnson is going to be a name that we're going to hear for the rest of the season, no matter if it's Rattler or if it's Mr. Show that comes in. I think Juwan is definitely a safe bet. Tough guys in that linebacker core with, Fred Warner and those guys. But I think Juwan Johnson just being a target monster with a young quarterback, I think he's going to be very, very good this week. And last but not least, man, a lot of people talked about him in the preseason, but Brandon Strange with the Jacksonville Jaguars looked really, really good last week. I think that's going to continue. Again, I think the Jags are going to have to play, keep up with the Bengals this week. They're going to look a lot better on offense. It didn't look great last week, so they're going to come out motivated. I think Strange is going to have a really, really good game against Jacksonville. I think he's one of those guys that you definitely want to lock in, all right? So, tonight is Thursday Night Football. We're going to do a few picks on Prize Picks. Shout out to Prize Picks, man. Again, I live in Georgia. That's the one that we have to lock in. But if you use Hard Rock, MGM, or whatever else, these are bets that you definitely want to look at for Thursday night and lock those in. All right, first guy I got on my list tonight, Deebo Samuel, 2.5 receptions. Last week, Deebo Samuel had 10 targets. Yeah, 10 targets in that Commanders offense. I think he's going to get a lot of targets again today. 2.5 receptions for Deebo. We're up on that one. Dontayvion Wicks, right? One of those guys I just like. He always has safe bets to me that I always cash out on. All right, he's at 17.5 receiving yards. I'm going to be up on that. He's a clear-cut wide receiver 3 in that offense. I think Jordan Love's going to look for him. He has a hard time catching the ball at times, but he's a great route runner. 17.5 receiving yards. I'm up on it. I'll probably see him close to 25 to 40 yards tonight. So, Dontayvion, lock that in. Bill Krosky-Merritt tonight. All right, they got him at 38.5 rush yards. I'm going up on that one. I know the Packers looked really good against the run last week against the Lions, but I like Bill in this offense. Last week, he had over 60 yards rushing and a touchdown. I think he's going to be the clear-cut running back 1 before it's over and done with. So 38.5 yards tonight, I think so. I like to probably see Bill around 45 to 55 yards rushing tonight, but he's going to go over that 38.5. Lock in Bill Krosky-Merritt tonight. Another guy tonight on the 6th play that we're putting together on Prize Picks, Jaden Reed. He's a clear number one wide receiver for the Packers. I think Jaden Reed at 38.5 receiving yards tonight. I'm up on that one. He's very explosive, gets catches out of the RPO. He runs out of the slot all over the field. I think Jaden Reed, 38.5 receiving yards, clears tonight. Definitely want to go on the up on that one. Another guy, right? Surprising name tonight, but Noah Brown, 20.5 receiving yards. I want to go up on that one. I thought Noah Brown looked good in that Commanders offense last week. I thought the Commanders offense didn't score a lot of points, but they made a lot of mistakes in the game. I think week 2, they'll clean up some of those things, and I think Noah Brown will definitely get some targets tonight. Last week, he had 50% in the snap count, so he's going to be the clear number 3 wide receiver right now. 20.5 receiving yards a night for Noah Brown. I think they're going to really focus on Debo and Terry. I think that will clear. 20.5 receiving yards for Noah Brown tonight. We're up on that. And then we got a safe one tonight. I know Terry McLaurin didn't look good last week, but they got him at 34.5 receiving yards tonight. I think Terry will definitely clear that tonight. He's clearly Jaden Daniels' number 1 wide receiver. He's probably, a little rusty as well because he sat out most of the preseason with the contract negotiations. But week 2, like I said, I think they're going to clean up some things. Terry McLaurin, 34.5 receiving yards tonight. Lock it in, boys. Hey, I'm excited about Thursday night football. You got the Packers and Commanders. Should be a really good game. I'll be checking back in with you guys this Saturday, Sunday for some more bets. I got a 6 play on Prize Picks, and I'm telling y'all want to lock in on Sunday and make some extra cash, all right? Fantasy football questions, definitely hit me on the YouTube. Hit me on Instagram as well as my TikTok. Thank you guys so much for supporting the pod so far. Super excited about week 2 coming up. Gyms with Josh, EP5. Follow us on all the social media platforms. Peace. Y'all have a good one.